When dreams feel too far away, the alarm clock screamed at 5 in the morning, but Amelia Torres was already awake. Sleep had become a luxury she could no longer afford. She rolled out of her narrow bed in the studio apartment she shared with 2 other girls, her body aching from another late-night serving tables at Romano's restaurant. The tiny space smelled of instant coffee and yesterday's takeout, constant reminder of how far her dreams seemed from reality. Amelia caught her reflection in the cracked mirror hanging on the bathroom door. Dark circles shadowed her brown eyes, and her long black hair hung limp around her shoulders. At 24, she should have been living her best life, but instead, she felt like she was disappearing a little more each day. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother back in Milwaukee. "Mia, when are you coming home? This art thing isn't working." Amelia deleted the message without responding. She had heard the same words from everyone who claimed to care about her. Her high school guidance counselor had said it. Her ex-boyfriend had said it. Even her best friend David sometimes looked at her with pity in his eyes. But Amelia refused to give up. Every spare moment between her 3 jobs went into her art. She painted on canvas scraps she found in dumpsters behind art supply stores. She sketched on napkins during her breaks. Her tiny corner of the apartment overflowed with paintings of city life, dreams, and the invisible people society forgot. The morning routine was always the same. Coffee shop from 6 to 10, then a rushed subway ride to her second job at a downtown office building where she cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. Nobody looked at her there. She moved through the corporate halls like a ghost, invisible in her uniform, listening to fragments of conversations about deals worth millions while she scrubbed away their footprints. By evening, she would transform into a different version of herself. The catering company she worked for specialized in high-end events. And tonight was the opening of the Whitmore Gallery's new exhibition. Amelia slipped into her black dress and white apron, pulling her hair back into a neat bun. She looked professional, presentable, but still invisible. The Whitmore Gallery buzzed with Chicago's elite. Men in $1,000 suits discussed business while sipping champagne that cost more than Amelia made in a week. Women dripped in diamonds and designer gowns, their laughter echoing off the pristine white walls. Amelia weaved between them with her tray of appetizers, a shadow among the spotlights. She paused in front of one painting, an abstract piece that sold for more money than she would see in 5 years. The artist's statement spoke of finding meaning in chaos, but to Amelia, it looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas and called it profound. She shook her head and continued serving, wondering if her own work would ever hang in a place like this. That's when she noticed him. Jonathan Blake stood apart from the crowd, studying a sculpture with intense focus. While everyone else seemed to be there to see and be seen, he appeared genuinely interested in the art. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his navy suit probably cost more than Amelia's rent for 6 months. But there was something different about him, a loneliness that reminded her of her own reflection in the morning mirror. Jonathan had built Blake Industries from nothing into a technology empire worth hundreds of millions. At 32, he was Chicago's youngest self-made millionaire, gracing magazine covers and attending charity galas. But success had come with a price. Every friendship felt transactional. Every relationship seemed to revolve around what he could provide. He attended events like this because it was expected, not because he enjoyed them. He turned from the sculpture, and their eyes met across the crowded gallery. Amelia froze, tray still in her hands as Jonathan's gaze held hers for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. She saw recognition there, not of who she was, but of what she was feeling. The loneliness, the sense of being surrounded by people yet completely alone. A woman in a red dress brushed past Amelia, breaking the spell. "Excuse me?" the woman snapped, clearly annoyed at having to acknowledge the help. Amelia mumbled an apology and moved away, but she could feel Jonathan's eyes following her. Jonathan watched the young woman disappear into the crowd, struck by something he couldn't name. In that brief moment of eye contact, he had felt more connection than he had experienced in years of networking and socializing. There was something real about her, something authentic in a room full of pretense. He tried to focus on the conversations around him, nodding politely as Victoria Sterling, his ex-fiancée appeared at his side. Victoria was everything society expected him to want. Beautiful, wealthy, connected. Their engagement had been more merger than romance, and when it ended 6 months ago, Jonathan felt relief rather than heartbreak. "Darling, you look distracted," Victoria purred, her hand sliding possessively through his arm. "The Hendersons are here, and Daddy thinks it would be good for business if you spoke with them." Jonathan nodded absently, still scanning the crowd for the server with the expressive eyes. Victoria followed his gaze and frowned. "Jonathan, you're not paying attention to me." "Sorry," he said, though he wasn't sorry at all. "I thought I recognized someone." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Really, who?" But Jonathan couldn't answer because he didn't know. He only knew that in a room full of people trying desperately to be seen. One person had made herself invisible, and somehow that made her the only one worth seeing. Amelia spent the rest of the evening avoiding that corner of the gallery. Every time she glanced over, Jonathan was surrounded by important-looking people. But she caught him looking her way more than once. It was ridiculous, she told herself. Men like that didn't notice women like her, except to hand them empty glasses or ask for directions to the bathroom. But when the evening finally ended and she was packing up the catering supplies, she found a business card tucked under one of the serving trays. Blake Industries was embossed in silver letters, with a phone number written in elegant handwriting on the back. Below it, just 2 words: "Call me." Amelia stared at the card for a long moment, her heart racing. David would tell her it was crazy. Her mother would warn her about rich men who played games with poor girls. Every practical part of her brain screamed that this was a mistake waiting to happen. But as she rode the late-night bus home, watching the city lights blur past her window, Amelia tucked the card safely in her purse. For the first time in months, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't quite as invisible as she thought. The city slept around her, but Amelia's mind was wide awake, full of possibilities and the memory of eyes that had truly seen her. When 2 worlds collide, Amelia stared at the business card for 3 days before she found the courage to call. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times. But when Jonathan's warm voice answered on the second ring, every prepared word vanished from her mind. "This is Jonathan Blake. This is Amelia. From the gallery. You left your card?" Her voice sounded small and uncertain. Nothing like the confident woman she had imagined herself being. There was a pause, and for a terrifying moment, she thought he had forgotten her entirely. Then his voice softened with what sounded like relief. "Amelia, I was hoping you would call. I know this might seem strange, but would you like to have coffee sometime?" "Coffee," she repeated, as if the concept was foreign. "Yes, just coffee. Nothing fancy. I'd like to talk to you if that's okay." Amelia found herself agreeing before her rational mind could protest. They arranged to meet at Rosie's Diner in her neighborhood, a place she suggested because it was the opposite of everywhere Jonathan probably went. If he was going to see who she really was, might as well start with the truth. Jonathan arrived at Rosie's Diner 15 minutes early, his Tesla looking wildly out of place among the older cars parked on the street. The diner was everything his usual spots were not. Vinyl booths with duct tape repairs, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of bacon grease that had soaked into the walls over decades. He loved it immediately. Amelia walked in exactly on time. Jonathan felt that same jolt of recognition he had experienced at the gallery. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Without the catering uniform, she looked younger, more vibrant, but also more guarded. "You came," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Amelia shrugged, studying the menu she probably knew by heart. "Rich guys don't usually hang out in places like this." "How do you know I'm rich?" Jonathan asked, though the question was rhetorical. Everything about him probably screamed money. From his watch to his perfectly tailored clothes. "Google," Amelia said simply. "I looked you up. Blake Industries, 32 years old, worth more money than I can properly understand. The question is, what do you want with someone like me?" Her directness caught him off guard. Most people danced around his wealth, either trying to impress him or pretending it didn't matter. Amelia laid it out like a fact that needed addressing. Honestly, I don't know, Jonathan said. But that night at the gallery, when I saw you, it was the first time in years that I felt like someone actually saw me too. Amelia raised an eyebrow. Saw you? You were surrounded by people all night? Exactly. People who wanted something from me, or wanted to be seen with me, or wanted to sell me something. But you looked at me like I was just a person. The waitress, a woman in her 50s named Betty, who had known Amelia since she started coming to the diner, appeared with a pot of coffee. The usual, honey? She asked Amelia, then looked curiously at Jonathan. And what can I get you, handsome? Whatever she's having, Jonathan said, earning an approving nod from Betty. Pancakes and bacon it is. You picked a good one, Amelia. He's got nice manners. As Betty walked away, Amelia felt her cheeks burn. She thinks we're on a date, aren't we? Jonathan asked, and something in his tone made her look up. His expression was serious, hopeful. I don't date men like you, Amelia said quietly. What kind of man am I? The kind who has options. The kind who could have anyone. She gestured around the diner. This isn't your world, Jonathan, and your world isn't mine. Jonathan leaned forward, his voice dropping. Maybe that's exactly why this could work. Their conversation flowed easier than either had expected. Jonathan told her about growing up in foster care, building his company from a single-room apartment, the loneliness that came with success. Amelia shared her dreams of being an artist, the 3 jobs that barely paid her bills, the way people looked through her as if she didn't exist. What kind of art do you do? Jonathan asked, genuinely curious. Amelia hesitated. You'd probably think it's silly. Try me, I paint people. Not portraits exactly, but moments. Like the businessman on the subway who looks sad even though he's reading good news on his phone, or the mother in the park who's watching her kids play, but you can tell she's thinking about something else entirely. The invisible emotions people carry. Jonathan felt something shift in his chest. That's not silly at all. That's beautiful. You haven't seen any of it. I'd like to, if you'd show me. Before Amelia could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from David. Girl, where are you? Your shift starts in 20 minutes. I have to go, Amelia said, the spell broken. I'm working at the coffee shop today. Which one? Grind Coffee on 5th Street. But Jonathan, I don't think what time do you get off? 6, but I'll pick you up. We can continue this conversation. Amelia wanted to protest, to explain all the reasons why this was a mistake, but Jonathan was already standing, leaving money on the table for both their meals, plus a generous tip that made. Betty beamed from behind the counter. See you at 6, he said, and walked out before she could argue. The afternoon at Grind Coffee passed in a blur of latte orders and anxious thoughts. David, her best friend and coworker, noticed immediately that something was different. You're glowing, he said during a brief lull. Did something happen? Did you sell a painting? I had coffee with someone, Amelia said, trying to sound casual. Someone? What kind of someone? Do I need to run a background check? Before she could answer, the bell above the door chimed, and Jonathan walked in. The coffee shop, filled with college students and local artists, fell silent. He looked like he had stepped out of a magazine. All clean lines and expensive fabric in their world of vintage t-shirts and paint-stained jeans. Amelia, he said, approaching the counter with a smile that made her heart skip. You're early, she managed. I finished my meetings early. Thought I'd try your coffee while I wait. David appeared at her shoulder, not even trying to hide his curiosity. I'm David, he said, extending his hand. Amelia's best friend and protective guardian. Jonathan shook his hand firmly. Jonathan Blake, and I understand the protective part. Blake Industries, Jonathan Blake? David's eyes widened. That's the one. David looked between them, then leaned close to Amelia's ear. Girl, we need to talk. But there was no time for talking because Victoria Sterling chose that moment to make her entrance. She swept into the coffee shop like she owned it, her designer heels clicking on the worn wooden floor. Every eye in the place followed her. But her attention was focused solely on Jonathan. Darling, Victoria said. her voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet space. "I've been looking everywhere for you." "You missed our dinner reservation." Jonathan's expression tightened. "We don't have a dinner reservation, Victoria. Of course we do. At La Bernardine. Daddy specifically requested you join us." Her eyes flicked dismissively over Amelia, taking in the coffee shop uniform and the simple ponytail. "I see you're slumming it today." The insult hit Amelia like a physical blow. But before she could respond, Jonathan stepped forward, his voice cold as ice. "Victoria, you need to leave." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This is harassment, and I won't tolerate it." Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Jonathan, be reasonable. We both know this little phase of yours won't last. When you're ready to return to reality, I'll be waiting." She left as dramatically as she had arrived, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Amelia felt every eye in the coffee shop on her, whispers starting to buzz around the room. She wanted to disappear, sink through the floor and never come back up. "Amelia," Jonathan said gently. "I can't do this," she whispered, untying her apron with shaking hands. "I can't be the entertainment in whatever game you're playing. It's not a game, isn't it?" She looked up at him, tears threatening. "You show up in my world, you make me feel special for 5 minutes. And then your real life walks in to remind me exactly where I belong. Victoria is my past. It's not my present. But she's your world. The galas, the restaurants I can't pronounce, the people who look at me like I'm dirt on their shoes, that's your life, Jonathan. And I'm just a curiosity." She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, needing air, needing space, needing to think. But Jonathan followed her onto the sidewalk, catching her arm gently. "Amelia, wait, please." She turned to face him, and he saw the hurt in her eyes, the vulnerability she had been trying so hard to hide. "I know this is complicated," he said. "I know our worlds are different, but I meant what I said in there. Victoria's my past. You could be my future, if you'll give us a chance. Your future." Amelia laughed bitterly. "Jonathan, I work 3 jobs just to afford a studio apartment with 2 roommates. You probably spend more on lunch than I make in a week. How's that supposed to work? We figure it out together." Something in his voice made her pause. The certainty, the hope, the way he said together like it was a promise he intended to keep. "This is crazy," she said quietly. "The best things usually are." Amelia looked at him for a long moment. This millionaire who had wandered into her ordinary life and turned it upside down. She thought about the business card she had kept in her purse for 3 days, the way he had made her feel seen at the gallery, the genuine interest in his eyes when she talked about her art. Maybe David was right. Maybe she needed to talk this through, to think rationally about what she was getting into. But when Jonathan smiled at her like that, rationality seemed overrated. "One more chance," she said finally. "But if this blows up in my face, I'm blaming you." "Deal," Jonathan said. And for the first time since Victoria's dramatic entrance, Amelia felt herself smile back. Neither of them noticed David watching from the coffee shop window, his expression worried but hopeful. Or Victoria sitting in her car across the street, her phone already dialing her father's number. The game, whether they wanted to play it or not, had officially begun. When love rewrites your story, the morning sun filtered through Amelia's tiny apartment window as she sat on her narrow bed. Staring at the business card Jonathan had given her weeks ago, the edges were worn from her nervous handling, but the words remained clear. Blake Industries. She had been carrying it everywhere, talisman of possibilities she was too afraid to use. 3 weeks had passed since their coffee date, and everything had changed. Jonathan had become a constant presence in her life, showing up at the coffee shop during her shifts, taking her to small neighborhood restaurants, listening to her talk about art with genuine interest. But today was different. Today he had asked to see her paintings. Amelia gathered her canvases from every corner of the cramped apartment, stacking them carefully against the kitchen counter. Her roommates were both at work, giving her the privacy she needed to spread out years of creative effort. Each painting told a story of struggle, of dreams deferred, of moments when she had almost given up, but found the strength to continue. When Jonathan arrived, he looked out of place in the small space. his expensive clothes and confident bearing making the apartment seem even shabbier by comparison. But his expression was focused, respectful. He studied each piece she showed him. "This one," he said, stopping in front of a painting of a woman cleaning office buildings at night. "Tell me about this one." "That's me," Amelia said quietly. Or it was me, anyway. "I painted it after a particularly long night at the office building downtown. I was invisible to everyone there, just another worker they didn't really see. But I saw them. I saw their lives, their stress, their humanity." Jonathan nodded slowly. "You captured something here that most people miss. The dignity in work that others take for granted." His understanding made her chest tight with emotion. No one had ever looked at her work this way. Such careful attention and genuine appreciation. "Jonathan," she began, then stopped. She had been thinking about this conversation for days, rehearsing the words. But now that the moment was here, her courage faltered. "What is it?" "I need to be honest with you about something. I've been researching gallery submissions, trying to figure out how to get my work seen. But every application requires connections, references, proof of previous exhibitions. I don't have any of those things. I'm starting from nothing." Jonathan was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "What if you didn't have to start from nothing?" "What do you mean?" "I know people in the art world. Gallery owners, collectors, critics. I could make some introductions." Amelia felt her stomach drop. "I can't let you do that." "Why not?" "Because then it wouldn't be real. People would only pay attention to my work because of who you are, not because of what I've created." Jonathan studied her face, seeing the conflict there, the desire warring with pride. What if there was a way to do it that felt authentic to you? Before she could ask what he meant, her phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and when she answered, his voice was tense with excitement. "Amelia, you need to get down to Grind Coffee right now. There's someone here asking about your paintings." "What?" "Who?" "Just get down here. Trust me." The coffee shop was busier than usual when Amelia and Jonathan arrived. David met them at the door, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "There's a woman inside," he whispered. "Says her name is Helen Morrison. She owns some fancy gallery downtown. She's been asking about the artist who did the sketches on the community board." Amelia's heart stopped. The community board at Grind Coffee was covered with local artwork that customers could browse and purchase. She had pinned a few of her smaller pieces there months ago, more for encouragement than any real hope of sales. Helen Morrison was a striking woman in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She stood in front of the community board, examining one of Amelia's sketches with intense focus. "Are you the artist?" Helen asked when Amelia approached. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Amelia Torres. These pieces have been haunting me since I walked in here 20 minutes ago. There's something raw and honest about them that's rare in today's art world." Helen turned to face her fully. "I'd like to see more of your work." Amelia felt the world tilt slightly. This was happening without Jonathan's connections, without his influence. This was purely about her art. "I have paintings at my apartment." She managed to say, "Could we arrange a time for me to view them? I'm always looking for fresh talent. I think you might be exactly what my gallery needs." The meeting was arranged for the following afternoon. That night, Amelia could barely sleep. She cleaned her tiny apartment until it sparkled, arranged and rearranged her paintings, and changed clothes 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that David had insisted made her look professional. Helen Morrison arrived exactly on time, and her reaction to Amelia's work was immediate and powerful. "My God," she breathed. Standing in front of a painting Amelia had titled "Invisible Hands." It showed the shadowy figures of service workers keeping a gleaming office building running, their faces obscured but their humanity shining through. "This is extraordinary." They spent 2 hours discussing Amelia's work, her techniques, her inspiration. Helen asked thoughtful questions about color choices, composition, the stories behind specific pieces. It was the kind of serious artistic conversation Amelia had dreamed of having her entire life. "I want to offer you a solo exhibition," Helen said finally. It would be your first show, which means we'd need to price the pieces conservatively. But it would be excellent exposure for your career. Amelia felt tears spring to her eyes. Are you serious? Completely serious. However, I should mention that there might be some additional attention because of your relationship with Jonathan. Blake, the art world loves a story. And the mysterious girlfriend of Chicago's youngest millionaire is definitely a story. The mention of Jonathan's name cast a shadow over Amelia's joy. Will that hurt my credibility as an artist? Only if you let it. Your work speaks for itself, Amelia. Anyone with eyes can see that you have genuine talent. The publicity might get people in the door, but your paintings will make them stay. Over the next few weeks, Amelia threw herself into preparing for the exhibition. She created 3 new pieces specifically for the show, working late into the night in her apartment while Jonathan brought her takeout and sat quietly reading. Respecting her creative process, the night before the opening, Amelia stood in the Morrison Contemporary Gallery, surrounded by her paintings hanging on pristine white walls under professional lighting. They looked different here, more important, more real. Nervous? Jonathan asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Terrified, she admitted. What if no one comes? What if they come but hate everything? What if the only reason anyone shows up is to gawk at your girlfriend? Then we'll deal with it together. But Amelia, look around you. Look at what you've accomplished. 6 months ago, you were convinced you were invisible. Now, you're about to have your first solo exhibition. That's not luck or connections. That's talent and hard work. The opening reception was scheduled for 7 o'clock. By 6:30, a line had formed outside the gallery. Amelia peered through the window, her stomach churning with anxiety. I can't do this, she told David, who had arrived early for moral support. Yes, you can. You've been preparing for this moment your entire life. When the doors opened, the crowd flowed in like a tide. Amelia positioned herself near the entrance, greeting visitors and answering questions about her work. Some people she recognized from Jonathan's world, wealthy collectors and socialites who moved through art openings like professional networkers. But there were others too, young artists and students. Neighborhood regulars from the coffee shop, people who looked like they understood struggle and dreams deferred. The turning point came when an older man in a paint-stained jacket approached her. Tears in his eyes. That painting over there, he said, pointing to invisible hands. That's my life you painted. 40 years as a night janitor. And no one ever saw me the way you've shown us here. Thank you for making us visible. Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. A young mother connected with Amelia's painting about the exhaustion of working multiple jobs while raising children. A college student studying art talked about the courage it took to pursue creativity in the face of financial uncertainty. By the end of the night, Helen Morrison was beaming. We sold 8 pieces, she announced. And I've had 3 serious inquiries about commissioning new work. But the real validation came from the connections Amelia had made. The conversations about art and life, and the power of seeing and being seen. These weren't transactions or networking opportunities. They were genuine human moments sparked by her creativity, as the last guests filtered out. Jonathan found Amelia sitting on a bench in the gallery, staring at her paintings with wonder. So, he said, settling beside her, how does it feel to be visible? Different than I expected, she said honestly. I thought it would be about being seen by important people, about finally getting recognition. But it's really about seeing myself clearly for the first time. What do you see? Amelia considered the question. Looking around at the evidence of her artistic journey surrounding them, I see someone who refused to give up. Someone who found a way to turn pain into beauty, isolation into connection. I see an artist, Jonathan smiled, taking her hand. I've been seeing that all along, I know, and that's what made it possible for me to see it too. They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the fruits of Amelia's labor and the promise of what was to come. The invisible girl was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her voice and wasn't afraid to use it. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in her life, Amelia Torres felt like she belonged among them. Before she could respond, Her phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen, and when she answered, his voice was tense with urgency. "Amelia, you need to get down to the coffee shop right now. There's been an incident." Jonathan drove her to grind coffee in his Tesla, both of them silent with worry. When they arrived, they found David standing outside the shop with the manager, both looking shaken. "What happened?" Amelia asked, rushing to David's side. "Someone broke in last night," David said. "But it wasn't a normal break-in. They didn't take the cash register or the equipment. They went straight for the storage room where you keep your paintings." Amelia's blood turned to ice. "My paintings?" "Most of them are destroyed, slashed to pieces." And there was a note. He handed her a piece of expensive stationery with elegant handwriting. "Stay in your lane, little girl. Some people don't belong in certain worlds." Jonathan's face darkened as he read the note over her shoulder. "Victoria," he said, and there was murder in his voice. "You think your ex-girlfriend did this?" David asked. "I think she had it done," Jonathan replied grimly. "This has her fingerprints all over it." Amelia sank onto the curb, overwhelmed by the loss. Years of work, destroyed in one night. Her dreams quite literally torn to shreds. "I'm done," she said quietly. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world doesn't want me in it, Jonathan. And maybe it's right. No." Jonathan knelt beside her, his voice fierce. "No, you are not giving up. Not now, not ever. Look around you." Amelia gestured to the broken glass and the police tape. "This is what happens when someone like me tries to reach for something better. I get slapped back down, then we make them pay." The determination in his voice made her look up. "What? Victoria wants to play games? Fine." But she picked the wrong people to mess with. What happened next changed everything. Instead of retreating, Jonathan went on the offensive. He called Helen Morrison and arranged an emergency meeting. He hired a security team to protect Amelia. And most importantly, he helped her channel her anger and hurt into the most powerful paintings she had ever created. The new series was raw, emotional, and utterly fearless. Amelia painted her invisible life, her struggles, her dreams, and yes, her pain. She painted the destruction of her work and the cruelty of those who thought they could silence her simply because she came from nothing. Helen Morrison took one. Look at the paintings and offered Amelia a solo exhibition on the spot. "I've never seen work this honest," Helen said, her experienced eyes bright with excitement. "This isn't just art, it's revolution." The exhibition opening was set for 3 weeks later, and the art world buzz was immediate. Word spread that Jonathan Blake's mysterious new girlfriend was having her first show, and everyone wanted to see what the fuss was about. Victoria, predictably, was not pleased. "You're making a fool of yourself," she told Jonathan at a charity luncheon, her voice sharp with frustration. "And her. Do you really think she can handle this level of attention?" "She's going to crumble under the pressure. She's stronger than you think," Jonathan replied calmly. "Is she? Because from where I stand, it looks like you're setting her up for humiliation. The press is already calling her your charity case." For a moment, doubt flickered in Jonathan's eyes, and Victoria pounced on it. "Come home, Jonathan, to your real life, with people who understand your world. This experiment has gone far enough." That night, Jonathan found himself on Amelia's fire escape, watching her paint by lamplight in her tiny studio apartment. She was working on the centerpiece for her exhibition, a painting she called Invisible No More. It was a self-portrait, but not in any traditional sense. Instead, she had painted herself as she felt, as light breaking through darkness, as a voice finally finding the courage to speak. "It's beautiful," he said. "Climbing through the window, it's terrifying," Amelia corrected, not looking up from her canvas. "In 3 days, I'm going to put my entire soul on display for people to judge. What if Victoria's right? What if I can't handle it? Then I'll be right there beside you. What if that's not enough?" Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, considering her question seriously. "Then we'll figure it out together. But Amelia, I need you to know something. These past few weeks, watching you create, watching you fight, watching you refuse to be defeated. You've made me remember who I used to be before I became successful. You've made me remember what it feels like to dream." Amelia finally looked up from her painting, and he saw tears in her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." The night of the exhibition, Amelia stood in front of the Morrison Contemporary Gallery, paralyzed by fear. The red carpet stretched before her, photographers waiting. The Chicago elite ready to pass judgment on her life's work. "I can't do this," she told Jonathan, gripping his hand tightly. "Yes, you can. You're not invisible anymore, Amelia. You never were. You were just waiting for the right moment to let the world see your light." Together, they walked down the red carpet and into the gallery. The moment they stepped inside, Amelia knew something magical was happening. People weren't just looking at her paintings. They were connecting with them. She watched a businessman wipe tears from his eyes as he studied her piece about loneliness. A young woman stood transfixed before the painting of destroyed dreams, nodding as if she understood completely. "This is incredible," Helen whispered in her ear. "We've already sold 6 pieces, and the night is just getting started." But the real validation came from an unexpected source. An elderly man approached her, his expensive suit and confident bearing marking him as someone important. "Miss Torres," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert Sterling, Victoria's father." Amelia's blood ran cold, but she forced herself to shake his hand. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "My daughter's behavior has been inexcusable. But more than that, I owe you congratulations. This work, it reminds me why I fell in love with art in the first place." Before Amelia could respond, Victoria herself appeared at her father's elbow, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Daddy." "We should go," she said through gritted teeth. "In a moment, dear. I'm trying to purchase one of Miss Torres's paintings." The shock on Victoria's face was almost worth everything Amelia had endured. "Almost, you don't have to do this," Amelia told Robert quietly. "I know this situation is complicated, young lady," Robert said with a smile. "I didn't build my fortune by making decisions based on complications. I built it by recognizing talent when I see it. And you, my dear, have more talent in your little finger than most artists have in their entire bodies." As the evening wound down, Amelia found herself on the gallery's rooftop terrace, looking out over the city lights. She had sold 12 paintings, received 3 commission requests, and been approached by 2 museums interested in future exhibitions. Jonathan joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "So," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "how does it feel to be visible?" Amelia leaned back against him, feeling the warmth of his chest, the steady beat of his heart. "Terrifying," she said honestly. "But also ... right. Like maybe this is who I was always supposed to be." "I've been thinking," Jonathan said carefully, "about what comes next." "What do you mean?" He turned her in his arms so she was facing him. "I mean, us. I know we come from different worlds, and I know it won't always be easy. But I also know that I love you, Amelia Torres. I love your talent, your courage, your refusal to let anyone dim your light." Tears sprang to her eyes again, but this time they were tears of joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "Even though you're completely crazy for believing in me when no one else would." "Not no one else," Jonathan corrected, gesturing back toward the gallery where people were still admiring her work. "Everyone believes in you now. You just had to give them the chance to see you." As they stood there on the rooftop, surrounded by the lights of the city that had once seemed so cold and unforgiving, Amelia realized that she wasn't invisible anymore. She had found her voice, claimed her space, and discovered that love could indeed rewrite your entire story. The girl who had once cleaned floors and served drinks to people who looked right through her was gone. In her place stood an artist, a woman in love, a force to be reckoned with. And she was anything but invisible.